Hey, what's going on, everybody? Nick Hamilton here, and another edition of the NH Experience is back. With I have a special guest. This man is not only an innovator and a creator. I like to call him a man of faith, a man of determination. You've seen him all over. If you haven't, you better tap in because he's definitely got some pearls of wisdom to drop on us. He's been a member of the Nike family. He's been on the design team for Jordan Brand, Michael Jordan, Derek Jeter. The list goes on, and now he has his own design company that he's definitely invested into. Definitely something to check out. Also, I like to call him the Lucius Fox of our real-time world. He is definitely an innovator, a creator, a sonic visionary. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Jason Mayden. What's going on, Jason? How you doing, man?
I'm well, brother. I'm well. Thank you for the kind introduction, man. It means the world hearing those positive words be spoken by a brother. So I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Hey, man, you know what? I give credit where it's due, man. You definitely have earned it. You've had an incredible journey thus far, and I know the journey's far from over. But I want to tap into, how you got to that point because I was reading a lot of things on you, and it seemed like at a young age you always had that vision of where you wanted to be as far as being with Nike and being a part of Nike in some way, shape, or fashion. So I want to talk a little bit about that. When did you get that notion or that vision to say this is what I want to do at such a young age?
Oh man, it was honestly probably around the age of 7. I was in a hospital with septicemia, which is a blood infection, and I always tell people, when you're that young and you're growing up in the city and you're fighting, the psychological warfare of inner city life, where you may not have to see trauma to feel it, and then you experience trauma through being sick. You start to value time differently. For me, I don't focus so much on, putting things off till tomorrow. So I began to live in that moment, and that just really made me focus, intently focus on what I cared about. I cared about creativity. I cared about self-expression. I cared about the visual arts because all of my heroes were people that did something that we can look back and study and research, right? They sacrificed themselves, or they put themselves in situations where their education and creativity was the thing that built their legacy. And at that age, man, I just knew I didn't want to be left behind by history. I wanted to do more than just be a little black boy that was sick that could die. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if it was Nike, but I gravitated towards Nike because of Michael Jordan and what he was doing in Chicago growing up in the 80s and 90s. And, my heroes like Bo Jackson and Deion Sanders, and a lot of people don't talk enough about, Ben Wilson, Benji, that was killed. Like, you grow up in the city where you lived through the first black mayor, and then you see a person who had the potential to be better than Michael Jordan from your city, be shot down with senseless violence, and you hear these stories. I just wanted to be part of the narrative that was positive and part of the narrative that was inspiring and encouraging to me. And at that time, it was sneakers, and I just turned it into my oasis of hope, because being around footwear, being next to shoes, being in Foot Locker, man, it was the only place where I felt safe, and I felt, that the things I was into had a platform, because, we didn't have the internet. I couldn't go and talk to people. You had comic book shops, you had baseball card shops that I used to hang out in, and you had shoe stores. That was pre-culture. Those were the 3 places you needed to be. And so that's kind of what kept me going, man, is that vision of wanting to be remembered by history for being the person that used my little gifts and talents to at least tell a different narrative of who we are as a people.
Now you talked about superheroes. You talked about, obviously comic books. So I gotta ask, who were your superheroes growing up for you?
In real life?
Real life, comic books.
Man, so I would say in the comic book world, it was Lucius Fox, as you mentioned. I was a Batman fan because of Lucius Fox, and what people don't realize about the importance of that character is this was a brother who ran Wayne Enterprises. He was the CEO of a publicly traded company. And at the same time, he was a real one behind the scenes making weapons to help Bruce Wayne do what he did. So Lucius Fox had the pressure of managing a board, making sure they hit quarterly goals, delivering value back to the shareholders. But then this man would go into the lab at night and create for the son of his best friend who was in the streets fighting crime. Like, if you're not inspired by that, then it's like, man, how could you not be, right? And so that's why Batman to me was my hero because he didn't have superpowers, man. He had resources and he had a brilliant black man behind him. And I feel like if I could be that brilliant black man behind people who fight for change, then I'm all for it. So definitely the fictitious hero. My dad, my uncles, the people in my family. I grew up hearing stories of my great uncle that was Malcolm X's security guard and bodyguard, who after Malcolm X was killed, my father, as a young boy, the NOI sent people to protect my father and my family, and his family, my grandma's, his siblings. They went to the house because of my uncle's, prominence and what he was doing to help our people advance. I heard stories of my cousin helping with Fred Hampton's movement and sacrificing her well-being. So I grew up around real superheroes, man. Community builders, teachers, activists, pastors, blue collar people who didn't settle for what was being sold to them and they wanted more. So I know that superheroes are real, man, because I was raised by them, fictitiously and non-fictitiously. I've seen it in my life, and I thank those people deeply for the person that I am today.
When you talk about, superheroes, and we talk about, fictional as well as nonfiction superheroes, and then you get to a point where you're getting yourself into school, obviously, high school, going into design school, and then you end up going in with Nike. What was your goal when you first got into Nike? And then what were some of the bumps and bruises you had to deal with to get to that point where you were one of the head designers, especially being a young black man into a company that was still innovative, but yet and still, it was a company that didn't have too many people that looked like us on the inside.
Nah, man, that's a great question. And what the stories that I haven't told yet, that I'll share with you, because I know your audience, they're looking for something that, is honest and truthful and that they can lean into. So the stories that I haven't shared yet, because I'm gonna eventually write them down for my own healing and put it out into the world, are around the experiences and the trauma I faced in undergrad. CCS is my undergraduate school. I sit on the advisory board. I love it. It's an amazing place. It's in Detroit. However, I say that as a caveat to what I'm going to say next. It is predominantly white when I joined. I don't know what the mixture is now. I haven't looked at the data, but when I joined, it was in the heart of downtown Detroit, which at that time in 1998 looked like a scene out of I Am Legend. We had wild deer running through downtown Detroit. They had these fabric facades that they would put in front of skyscrapers, and they would backlight them to make it look like people were in these abandoned skyscrapers. The sewers, had the steam coming out of it. It looked like in a post-apocalyptic scene in a Hollywood movie when I was in undergraduate school. But what was so crazy to me is that when I crossed over into the threshold of the world of CCS, it was perfect. It was all white people. The black people were a minority. And mind you, we're in the heart of Detroit, one of the blackest cities in America. But yet I was a minority on a campus that was privileged and private. And so all the things that you would experience in that environment, that duality, that weirdness, that structure of oppression that allows poor people to sleep behind a private art institute in Detroit, that the same system that puts that brother and sister to sleep in an abandoned pool house is the same system that allowed me to go and put my work in front of Honda and Toyota, right? And so while I was in school, there was a lot of backlash from my peers towards me because I would turn down the opportunities that they coveted. So I would win awards and win competitions and then give the prize back just to prove a point. Like, I don't need to play the game you're playing. I don't need to be in this major to feel like I'm valuable. Because they would tell us a lot that if you weren't in transportation design, that you were a failed car designer if you went to product design. That was the language. And for me in particular, the thought was that, oh, black people don't have the talent anyway. So of course you couldn't get into transportation design. Of course you couldn't do this. You're technically inferior anyway. So we don't have a lot of expectations for you. But unfortunately, when that language was applied towards me, they didn't realize that I'm not there to play games. I was there to outwork them. I was on my way to, a very different university to major in engineering, mechanical electrical engineering. I was going to double major, go to Georgia Tech. Was hit by a drunk driver senior year in high school, and it was my track and field coaches who encouraged me to go to design school. So I came with a different work ethic. During my time in undergrad, I would write letters to Nike because I started as a kid. I would submit to, any open job that they had. I was fighting to get an internship, and I would constantly be told by my peers and even some faculty members who are no longer there, "Oh, you'll never get a job at Nike. Why would they hire you? Why would they what would they want from you? There's much better students. Um, there was a professor who I always shout out because he's a white man. That's when I talk about an accomplice, people that put themselves in the line of fire to support. This brother did it for me, and he did it for several other people like me because he truly was a man of faith. This, my professor, Mr. Stephen Shock. So he allowed me to do an independent study where I created a shoe that was based on technology. So an accelerometer put inside of a snowboard boot. And I was able to create a predictive or adaptive playlist that matched accelerations and decelerations of people who were snowboarding, and the music would match their movement. That became the basis of my portfolio, which allowed me to get an internship at Nike. That happened, then my whole world changed. Because prior to that moment, I won a competition to take a job in Paris and go to school in Paris to design cars for Renault and Peugeot. And I turned that down because I got an internship at Nike. And I remember distinctly some of my classmates saying that I was an ungrateful nigga, because I had gotten accepted to this prestigious school called Strat in Paris. I had won this competition for product design and transportation design, but I turned it down because I went to Nike. And I remember distinctly the words that were used and what they wrote on my work. I had people write ungrateful nigga on my work. And none of that made me feel some type of way, because I'm like, y'all salty that I'm just outworking you. So when I graduated senior year, my senior show, I graduated with a job. That was my goal, graduate with a job. I couldn't wait to find a job after graduation. I wanted to walk across the stage fully employed because I knew what that would mean for my people, for my family, and for others who would come after me. And when I graduated, I did have a job at Nike. They hired me pretty much at the end of my internship, which was a blessing. Lisa Olivia, the recruiter at the time, phenomenal woman, also a white woman who's an ally. She put her job on the line and fought for me to get my job. And my senior show, she came out to visit. Even though I had a job, she still came to see my final work, and she came to see other students' work that may have been interested in footwear, and they defaced my senior wall. They broke the N-word all over my work, but they didn't realize they were copies. They were printouts, and so the real work was on the back of the board, because I figured if you're that stupid to be racist at this time period, then you're probably stupid enough to not realize that my real work's on the back side of the board. And so they didn't realize it. So I turned my board around. There was my real senior work, and I was able to display it. And that was my experience prior to getting into Nike. So I already knew that my industry design was very unforgivingly racist, because they felt that design was such I would say, elevated expression of creativity, such an exclusive group of people. If you weren't European or you weren't Asian, you don't have a space in the design industry. So I was up against that. I was up against the British accent. I was up against, the Japanese design sensibility. They didn't think that Black people had a design aesthetic that would be valued by the masses. So when I got to Nike, I faced some really interesting challenges with managers that had asked me questions about my gang affiliation. Are you a Blood or a Crip? And I was completely blown away, because I'm from Chicago. We don't even have that.
Right.
I also had a different experience where, Mr. Knight, once again, an ally, the founder of Nike, saw me work on the Monarch that everybody made fun of me for. And Mr. Knight, congratulated me on taking that project serious. And it was a $59 shoe that went on to become one of the highest grossing shoes in the history of footwear. And the reason I'm constantly pointing out the white allies is because I want to let people know something. As a Black man, I've experienced tremendous amount of overt and direct racism, because I'm usually the first person in that space. And I'm also not a Black person that code switches. I don't culturally sanitize myself. I just don't have the energy to do that. So if you don't like me, it's good, because I don't care. Like, tell me where I don't need to be. I just won't be there. I don't waste my time trying to get people to accept me in places they don't want me. I'd rather go where I'm wanted. So I've lost a lot of opportunities because I refuse to sell my soul. But there have been tremendous, powerful white people who have seen me deal with this, fight this, and still show up and outperform. And they put their careers, or they've invested their money and given their resources to help me along my way. So that's kind of my experience, man. In the beginning of my career, was having this weird hybrid reality of being targeted, but then being supported by the same types of people. So I didn't know how to function. And I just accepted each person as an individual experience versus constantly labeling them as a collective, because that would have made me go crazy. I wouldn't be able to trust anybody. But that's what it was in the early 2000s, man, for us in the sports industry. It wasn't what it is now.
Man, first of all, you are a gifted genius, brother, and you have incredible strength. Because based upon what you told me right now, I don't know if I would have been able to get through that in that particular way that you've been able to do that. So, my hat's off to you, man, for staying on course and staying focused on the bigger picture, man. Because that's tremendously tough. I mean, I know you're just telling me about it, but just for you to even experience what you're telling me, man, is absolutely incredible. I don't mean that in a positive sense. I mean, it's incredible that people will go to those lengths just because you are gifted enough and you've outworked everybody because you were focused on your goal. And that is a determination I think a lot of people need to latch on to and really need to center into, because your determination, your strength has really opened up some doors, man, for a lot more people that look like us, and whether they male or female, to get it through the door. So my kudos and hats off to you, Jason, because man, that's amazing.
Thank you, brother. It's I face it daily, man. But I think about this phrase I tell myself: I don't care if I'm first. I just damn sure won't be the last. So that's why I keep the endurance, man. I'm
Yep.
not gonna be the last. They're not ever gonna make me this unicorn. I ain't no unicorn. I'm common. I know a lot of brilliant black people, but if they let me through the door first, I'm not worried about keeping the door open. I'm worried about destroying the system and the structure that allows the door to even exist. So that to me is most important. And a lot of times for us as young people of color, we got to realize they don't really hate us. They hate their mediocrity, and they displace that hatred of their mediocrity onto our excellence. So if I let their mediocrity manifest itself in rage that suppresses my ability to fulfill my dream, I've purposefully allowed myself to self-sacrifice my ambition, self-sacrifice my worth, worried about somebody else's standard. So I live up to the standards I set for myself. I live up to the ideals I set for myself. And if somebody feels some type of way about me going for my dreams, and I look at them and say, well, whatever happening in your life, that's your problem. Ain't got nothing to do with me. That's you, not me. But I'm
Hello.
gonna go for mine. So that's it, man.
You made an interesting quote. You said you are only as good as the energy you conserve. We have to create. You were speaking on being healers and builders. At what point
Mhm.
did you feel like you had to be a healer and a builder, after going through all the, obviously, the success that you were starting to accumulate at Nike and then branching out even further? At what point did you feel like you had to be a healer and a builder, not just for yourself, but those of us in our community?
When I was 14 and I saw my friend shoot my friend in the face.
Mhm.
I mean, same circumstances, same upbringing, same community, same level of opportunity, talent, and access. And in 1 second, the destinies of our lives diverged. I became me and they became them in 1 second over an argument. That's when I realized like the violence that exists in our community is structured and is catalyzed because it's unaddressed trauma and pain. We haven't had a chance to heal. And so people wonder why we rage. It isn't a fact of it's not a reflection of our anger, it's a reflection of our pain, right? Anger is a symptom of something. The symptom of something that we need to address is the traumatic experiences that have been passed down generationally, and we haven't had a chance to heal from them. But we still got to perform at this high level to make everybody else feel comfortable with us being in the room. So watching my friend, who was one of the most gifted athletes I'd ever seen in my life. So we talk about the three sport athletes, the Deion Sanders, playing baseball, basketball, football. This kid was on track. I mean, baseball, he can hit, he can run, he can cover the plays. I mean, he was a 5 tool player. He could play every position in football outside of lineman. Every skill position, this kid could play it. Every position in basketball outside of a big man, he could play it. Like, I mean, he ran a 4.140, and this was in freshman year in high school, a 4.140 bench pressing 225 as a freshman in high school. And the difference in me and my sports mentality and his was that he had a family that where my family gave me a book, his family gave him a gun. And just that distinction, my family armed me with the mindset that was impenetrable. They gave him a weapon to protect himself because of where he grew up and what they were involved in. And so I started to notice like the difference between black people reaching their full potential and not is simply based on, do we have the space to heal? Have we been given the tools to heal? And I was fortunate to be given the tools to heal, because I was sick as a 7-year-old. So I started to think about self-care very early and
Okay.
mentally taking care of myself very early. But I understand a lot of our people haven't looked at taking care of ourselves mentally and healing here first. And so I feel like it's not only my duty and responsibility, but it's my God given job to encourage folks to heal. And creativity is such a neutral conversation that doesn't intimidate people. So I can introduce this concept of healing through the gifts that God has given me. Because if I was to do this in another form, people will be turned off. But the fact that I'm creative, I can say and do things in a way that universally strikes a chord with most people. So I'm just trying to use my voice, man, as best as I can to help the 14-year-old Jason who saw that incident and his two friends who unfortunately had different life trajectories help us heal to prevent that moment from happening. So everything I do is honestly trying to prevent that moment from happening for the rest of my life to any other kid that looks like me or any other kid that feels like me. Because mental health doesn't care about race. It doesn't. And so I also have to realize that healing doesn't care about race. So we got to heal our people first, so then we can help heal the system that is broken that we have to live in.
Right. No, that's very well spoken, man. You talked about going through the system, putting things together. Obviously, you got on the Jordan brand, which is one of the most iconic shoes to date. You working on that Jordan brand campaign. How much fun was that for you, and what was that experience like for you? And I mean, obviously, you worked on things with Derek Jeter and other athletes that you were able to come across at Nike. Like, how important and how much fun was that for you?
Man, it was I mean, bro, it changed my life. I mean, it was fun, it was exciting, it was educational. Mr. Jordan, I call him Mr. Jordan out of respect because of what he did for
Sure.
me. People give him a bad rap saying he don't help black people. He helps more black people, but he doesn't care about the credit. That's the problem. People get upset when people show off their charity, and then they get upset when they don't. So the man can't win. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, I am a byproduct of his direct investment in our people, like directly. So the fun part was seeing how excited he was about my gifts and talents. You know what I mean? That blew me away when I sat there with Mr. Jordan and he was excited for me to show him my skill set. Because
Mm-hmm.
I watched him my whole life and I watched these other athletes my whole life and I admired them for what they can do physically, but to be admired for what I could do intellectually and creatively, that gave me so much confidence in myself to say that I'm enough. I don't need anything else. I'm enough. I'm okay. I don't need to be 6'6" and have a jump shot. My jump shot is creativity, and that man values that. So that was the fun part, was having yourself recognized by somebody you look up to that looks like you. That just is a feeling that I wish every black person can have. But for me, it changed my life. The wild part also is he knew, for me specifically, I was the first employee from Chicago to work in Jordan Brand on campus, like literally. And it's a brand that's built on the essence of the shot. But I'm the first design intern for Jordan Brand, Nike's first black design intern from a traditional design school, and the first Chicagoan in Jordan Brand, like real Chicagoan from the South Side. And he knew how important that was. So when I got a chance to work on a game shoe, I've shared this story before, but I haven't really shared a lot of what he said to me afterwards because it's just been my own personal fuel. We went to his house, right? And his house was crazy. It was like Batman's house. It had 23 on the gate, had a box, the voice command. You talk to a gate opens up. So I'm bugging out. I'm in the car with Gentry Humphrey and the head of sports marketing at the time. And Gentry was in product, but I forget I think Dale Allen was there. Yeah. So Gentry Humphrey, Dale Allen, the sports marketing and product, two brothers. And I'm in the back seat. And they're not paying attention to the fact that I'm freaking out. I'm like, yo, I'm in Michael Jordan's crib. This is crazy. Like, man, like my whole life, man, I was like,
How many times you get a chance to do that, right?
bruh, I mean, like, so I'm freaking out. I'm staying cool, like, all right, act normal, act normal. Then we go into his house, right? And so it's this little driveway, he had his car garage, and then you take this left and then a quick right, and it's a beautiful front room. You see the family photos, wondering, like, man, all the moments he came home after the championship, he was right there sitting on that couch, crying with his trophy with his kids. And then you took left, and there it was, man. It was center court from the old Bull Stadium, and he had the semicircle trophy room in his house. And he let me stand in there and walk and see every bit of his accomplishments in chronological order, from Olympic medals to high school stuff to college stuff to Wheaties boxes, like this living museum in his house of what he did with himself as a black man. And I got a chance to sit there and soak it up. So behind there was this room that was like a conference room, and there was a bathroom that was adjacent to it. So I'm still freaking out. Like, man, I just stood at center court of the old Bull Stadium in Michael Jordan's crib. And there it is. There's the slam dunk competition from 1988. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, this is crazy. I go into the bathroom. I start crying. I call my mom and dad. I'm bugging out. I'm like, I cannot believe I did it. They crying on the phone. They like, this is crazy. I didn't realize this man had great acoustics because he heard the whole conversation. And so I come out of the bathroom. He knocks and is like, hey, man, tell your mom I say hello and wash your hands. And so he joking with me. And I was like, Mom, I got to go. I got to go. I didn't realize I was in there for like 10, 15 minutes. I come out. And the thing that was so dope is in that moment, he knew who he was and he knew what that meant to me. And he didn't make me feel like a fan. He made me feel like I did it. Because he was like, brother, I get it. I get how you feel right now. You got every reason in the world to feel the way you feel. Take your moment. Celebrate. Like, he cheered me on. He was like, I get it. I get it. You in my house. He cheered me on and let me just have my moment. He was like, have your moment. Clean yourself up and we can start the meeting. So I cried. I'm like, man, thank you. Hugged him. Had my moment. Cleaned myself up. I presented him my first sketch for his shoe. That alone, that experience alone gives me the energy to continuously show up for my people because he showed up for me. He could have clowned me. He could have made fun of me. He could have like, this big dude in the bathroom crying. What's wrong with him? Why is he acting like this? But he knew the responsibility he had in that moment to speak to me like I was a black man from Chicago, not an employee of Nike. And he did that. So that's why I carry myself the way I carry myself, because I know what he did for me, and I got to do it for other people.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you've done, like I said, it's amazing to see the things that you've done, the things that you've worked on. I mean, I'm sure I bought some of the shoes that you have designed and been a part of, and I'm sure thousands of tens of thousands of people have as well. But to be able to talk to the man that had the innovation, the creation to be able to do that, man, is significant in itself, because you don't find so many people that are out here like that, that's down to earth, that, have a purpose. And what did you feel like your purpose was? I know we talked about, you went to design school and you had a meeting with Michael Jordan, but what did you really feel your purpose was? And did you fulfill that purpose while you were at Nike?
Man, that's a good question. I feel like my purpose, it evolves as I evolve. I think a purpose isn't a linear experience. It's ever changing, because the deeper you go in your self-knowledge, the deeper you go in your own resilience. And that's when you start to discover how you're uniquely gifted. And that's when you realize your assignment. Because I think your purpose is the step to figuring out your assignment, right? Because a purpose is nothing else but a usage. That means that it's a transaction. Scissors have a purpose. I think people have a lot more impact than a single usage experience. I think people have assignments, and I think those assignments are fulfilled at different stages. Some people's assignments are filled when they're younger, and because we don't understand why people die when they're young, and some people's assignments are meant for, at the end of their life when they live longer, right? So we don't know what our assignment is attached to in terms of timeline. But along my progression, as I kept looking into my purpose and what is my purpose and what is our purpose, I realized that it wasn't about that. It was about, I was assigned to be a person that is supposed to advocate on behalf of the youth. That's my assignment. That's why everything I do, I'm figuring out a way to empower and strengthen the minds and the hearts of children, because that's how we prevent a lot of the stuff from happening as an adult. Like, you can prevent people from becoming racist. Racism is not a disease. It's not like you just catch it. No, you're taught to be racist. You can prevent people from becoming misogynistic, and you can prevent people from being megalomaniacs, right, and being very arrogant. You can prevent that if you pour into children. So I think that's what I discovered at Nike, is the fact that I was basically a visual representation of youth culture that was monetized, and realizing the power in how they monetize youth culture, and those people being folks that look like me, and realizing, like, while we're selling them products, we really need to be teaching them how to create their own instead of just teaching them how to consume. I switched my purpose mindset, which is purpose driven, I'm going to this destination, to an assignment mindset, which is, this is what has been uniquely assigned to me to accomplish in my life. And no matter what I do, I need to operate from that understanding that God has uniquely gifted me to speak to people in a way that reminds them of how they felt when they were children, and to give them that excitement, to give them that encouragement to feel like they could do anything. Because that's what happens with a kid. You give a kid a compliment, they're like, man, I could do anything now. You get a new haircut, you get a new pair of shoes. I can do anything. But at some point in time, that's taken from us as adults when we realize the systems of the world. So I just feel like God has assigned me to be a person that inspires and encourages to remind people that they can do anything. They literally, you can do anything. Miracles can happen. I'm a walking example of a miracle. So, I think that's how I discovered my assignment through searching for my purpose when I was at Nike.
Well, you definitely created another assignment with Super Heroic, the company that you created, that you're CEO of. Talk a little bit about that and how that has come to fruition. And at what point did you have that vision for Super Heroic and be able to execute it to where it is right now?
Yeah, man. So, first thing I would say is it was based on the love of my children. Seeing my own son deal with health challenges, it inspired me to go out and put imagery into the world that reaffirmed and reinforced, his value and his worth. And same thing with little girls of color because they get ignored often. And so that was the beginning of it, and the ability to figure out how to turn my love for my children into a company happened through experimentation. So I joined a bunch of startups. I was teaching at Stanford. I worked in venture capital. And so it wasn't a linear path towards this idea of super heroic. It was pretty up and down trying to figure out what's the best way to serve. Is it in academics? Is it in nonprofit? Is it in technology? Then I realized that the platform is footwear because footwear is the currency of youth. And so, we started the company 4 years ago. Unfortunately, as a result of everything going on, we've had to shut down indefinitely. So I'll be in the process of, figuring out how to continuously pursue this problem that I want to solve. Because Superheroic was a solution to a problem. I'm married to the problem. And the problem that I noticed with children, particularly children of color, is that images frame reality. And unfortunately, when they look at the imagery that represents them, it takes them down a path of self-despair. They see images of Black bodies being killed. They see images of bodies being objectified. They see, limited career paths. They see, very demeaning, stereotypical, narratives. And so I was trying to counterbalance, the imagery that reframed the mindset of the children that I want to impact. And so that's the problem I'm trying to solve. The solution was super heroic for that time period, but in this new reality post COVID-19, I have to use my gifts and talents to once again change how people view us, which is why I started Shoe and Tell, to kind of demystify the work we do, to give people that platform and include them in the conversations I get to have daily. So like stuff I do with CP and Jerry, these are conversations I have all the time. And I feel blessed and to open that up and to give people a different image of how Black men talk to one another in private. How we pour into each other, how we shout each other out. Like people don't think we do that enough. We do it a lot. We just don't do it in public. So that's my new mission, man, or new purpose, I should say, with this problem I'm trying to solve, is to find new ways to produce better imagery about who we are.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty dope, man. The way that you bring out like Chris Paul, I have to tap in a little bit. You do the shoe and tell and kind of just exposing people to that. Was that something that you've always wanted to do as far as just exposing people to kind of what goes on behind the scenes?
Yeah, so I was actually going to teach this class at the business school or either the design school at Stanford, and then it kind of hit me. I'm like, man, the people I want to reach probably won't even consider Stanford as a possibility for them. So am I doing this course from my own ego so I can say I built it, I went back to faculty status at Stanford, I did this thing, or am I really trying to empower the creative youth? And so I kept it a buck with myself and with the folks who wanted me to work with them on this class, and I just put it out on my own. Like I'll just put it out on my own. It's my content, my life, my experiences. And the folks at Stanford are always super supportive. I mean, they always support whatever I do, which is a blessing. And so, it really was just a need to give people a silver lining in their timeline. Because I know when people are scrolling on Instagram, they're seeing a lot of stuff that's meant to deteriorate their joy. And I figured if they could see something colorful, bright, inviting, engaging just on their timeline, and then find out that it's authentically me and not a company behind me, telling me what to say on their behalf, that I can at least be a bright spot in somebody's day and put them up on game that can help them.
Have you been able to kind of just let all this sink in with all the interviews that you've done and all the press clippings from, the Undefeated and going on various shows? Has this all kind of sinked in and said, wow, like I'm really like out here?
Yesterday was the first time that I've allowed myself to do that. Because I have this thing, man. If I'm, because people got to remember, I was trained underneath Michael Jordan and Derek Jeter. I didn't work for them. I was trained underneath them. I was an apprentice. The same way they approach sports is the same way that I approach business and design. And they would always tell me, you're only as good as yesterday's game. It's the last time you won. That's it. You don't get points for yesterday's game. So yeah, you can celebrate, but you got preseason. You know what I'm saying? Off season, like the moment you win a championship, you back in the gym because you started from zero the next season. So it's not that I don't appreciate my journey. It's just when you work with legends and heroes and you see them say, "Yeah, I won a World Series," but they in the gym the next day. That's crazy. That's like, wow, man. Like they stay hungry. So yesterday was the first time because to have CP say what he said about me to me without me prompting, and we haven't talked in person in maybe 6 months, but for him to say the things he said about me and how I made him feel, man, it meant a lot, because you wonder if the work you do and the care you take to pour into other people, to educate other people, specifically, folks of influence like him. He's a celebrity, right? He's a famous athlete. I'm just a dude that draws stuff. But for him to mention the impact I've had on him in his career and his life, that was the first time I was able to sit with my wife and kids and say, man, because they were on the call, my wife and kids and stuff. They always join the classes, and just to see how proud they were, to see their dad's reputation. That meant the world to me because that's the first thing they try to target is our reputations when they do things to us. But to see that another brother was willing to use his platform to speak highly of my name, that made me really stop and just appreciate the blessings a lot more,
Absolutely, man. It was dynamic, man. I must say, like, I will ask you this question because you talk about imagery, you talk about the images that are disseminated amongst us, especially in our various communities. How important in today's society, with all that's going on, we know about the George Floyd murder, we know about, Armand, he being savagely gunned down, the young lady EMT that was gunned down, and countless others, but even before these people that we constantly hear about. How important is Black media in today's society, and how effective can it be to tell the stories of people from our perspective?
I honestly think, to be completely frank, the word Black media is too small for the significance that is, attributed to Black people telling our stories. I don't even think it's media. I think it's medicine, Black medicine, because we get a chance to heal when we see ourselves in aspirational positions. So in 1900, W.E.B. Du Bois, most people don't pay attention to this. W.E.B. Du Bois specifically put on a photo exhibition in Paris at the World's Fair. In Paris, he took collections of images of what Black people really look like: doctors, lawyers, business owners, beautifully dressed Black people. And he did this exhibition as a chance to be able to say, this is how the world should see us versus what they were showing in the United States, which were people with, watermelon and big red lips. And so at a time when we were being demeaned in the media, because remember, this ain't the first time they've done this. This
Right,
is the consistent thing. And when I say they, I mean the system of oppression. So W.E.B. Du Bois, he counteracted that by putting on the photo exhibition in Paris. And, a lot of that is the reason why Paris and London and the jazz community and soul communities there have a different relationship with Black culture, is because they were shown a different image of Black culture from the US. Right? Now, there's still racism in Europe. Don't get me wrong. Racism was invented in the continent of Europe at the scale that it's at now. However, the relationship between the Black creative in Europe is different because of the work that W.E.B. Du Bois did. If you realize, like, after that moment, you had the Niagara movement, which gave birth to eventually the NAACP and all these other organizations, which then gave support and catalyzed the Harlem Renaissance. It's the Renaissance because of the love and the inclusion that was happening for Black creatives and thinkers in Paris, in London, where they were going and being celebrated for their works. And so that's the importance, man, is the legacy of W.E.B. Du Bois and the science behind what he did with the way he showed Black data, the way he showed Black imagery was important. So I think Black media is really Black medicine. It's the way we can heal, man.
Dope, man. I have nothing else to say behind that, man. That was it. We can conclude right now. Last thing, Do you ever see yourself opening up a school for creatives, for people, for kids that want to be innovative, kids that come out of our communities that don't see those images and don't are able to be exposed to those things, kind of like how you were exposed to at an earlier age overall?
I do, man. I do. I don't know if it needs to be a building. I just think it needs to be an intention, because buildings,
Okay.
once you build a structure, you automatically create a way to segregate. And you automatically create a way to filter and rank people's value within that structure. So you get a school, there may be a kid who's like, yo, man, I got a criminal background, or I don't have enough money. They're not gonna like me in this building. They're not gonna welcome me in this building. What a lot of people don't know is, man, I was accused of a crime I didn't even commit and had to stand in front of a judge and almost lose my entire life at the age of 13, being charged with assault and robbery and breaking and entering. I didn't even do it. I didn't even do it. It just was a person who decided that, yeah, he could have had done it. You know what I'm saying? It was ridiculous, but the judge obviously didn't charge me and let me go and was like, look, I understand what's happening. It was a white judge and people wrote letters on my behalf, but I realized, like, man, I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin and identity, and I allowed myself to just kind of self-select out of opportunities because I felt like I wasn't welcome in these environments because I didn't look like I was qualified to be in this environment. I didn't have the latest, coolest clothes and shoes. I wasn't the kid who had all the new gear. I was the kid wearing hand-me-downs. You know what I mean? So I'm really, really, really cautious of building a facility or a place because I know how I felt about myself. I wouldn't have shown up to my school. I'd be like, Jason is up here and Jason is so successful, man. What are you gonna want with me? I'm just a dude from the street, or I'm a young lady from the street. Why would they welcome me here? So I say an intention versus a school, because if I put my intentions into educating on multiple platforms, and then I give them a destination to go that's safe where they don't feel they'll be judged like a website, then it makes it easier for the knowledge to come through. Because education is one piece. I'm trying to give people knowledge that leads to action. And that requires an intention, not a facility, not a building, but an intention. So I do see that in my future. I don't know how it's going to manifest itself, but that's my goal, though.
Hey man, well, you know what? Continue to have fun. Continue to enjoy what you're doing. I'm glad to see you successful. You definitely have an anointing for people and gathering people, man. I must say, it's been sensational. Hope to have you on the show later on at another date where I know you're going to be exposing some other things that you've been doing or been working on and coming to light. So, man, I thank you. I appreciate you coming on. Let everybody know where they can follow you, keep up with you. I know you're running 1,000,000 miles an hour every day.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Easiest way, hit me on all social at Jason Mayden, JasonMayden. It's pretty straightforward. I respond back. Obviously, Nick hit me on IG. I try to show up where I can. I try to talk to folks. Whether it's one person or it's 16, 20,000 people. If I have the time and I can do it, I show up. If I don't, I tell people. But just reach out, support, and I'll try to support as best I can the things y'all are doing too.
Hey man, appreciate it, man. Thanks for that book tip too, man. I got a chance to check it out. How to Think Like a Roman Empire. That was dope, man.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
I'm gonna have to reread it now. I'm gonna definitely have to. Sure, for sure, for sure. Thank you so much for tuning in. The one and only Jason Mayden. Much success to you. Be safe. Much love to you and your family. And we'll talk to you soon, my man.
Yes, sir. Peace, brother.